In a shocking turn of events, FTX crypto exchange filed for bankruptcy protection this morning. This was a rapid unraveling of what had been emerging as one of the key pillars of the crypto economy. And after much back and forth involving a potential takeover bid by Binance, a potential rescue by the likes of Justin Sun and others, CEO Sam Bankman-Fried is filing for bankruptcy protection, Chapter 11, and resigning as CEO. A lot to unpack here, but it looks like we may be entering a period of long, drawn-out stuck funds for depositors on FTX.com. Should also be noted that FTX US was included in this filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, despite some initial words from Sam Bankman-Fried yesterday that FTX US would be spared from this, quote, shit show. All right, Adam, I'm tossing it to you. What are your thoughts on this being official? It seemed as though things were careening rapidly toward this outcome, and indeed, it looks like that has come to pass. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing here is a repetition of the same cycle that we've seen with other high-profile insolvencies over the course of the last year, which really is that there is a strong incentive to sugarcoat things and to lie until you absolutely cannot do so any longer. I think the FTX US inclusion within this bankruptcy proceeding, which included, I was surprised to see, a shocking 132 entities at least, that are wrapped up in this bankruptcy, including the U.S. arm of the exchange, which Bankman-Fried had recently said was entirely solvent and had all the funds to back it. That, again, really, I think, caps it off. You know, when you are in one of these positions, I thankfully have never been, and I will never be, like, I can't imagine the amount of stress that a person must be under at that point. And it just seems like if what you're trying to do there, you can think about it from an incentives perspective. If what Bankman-Fried was attempting to do was attempting to find some way, any way to avoid this outcome, then simply acknowledging the depth of what had actually happened here and what was likely to happen in a bankruptcy scenario would have sealed the fate of all of it. It would have taken away the opportunity to potentially fix it. The challenge, of course, is that by the time you get to this point where you're trying to, keep confidence up, whether you're talking about the Terra ecosystem, the Celsius ecosystem, or now FTX, among others, it's just too late, right? Like it's just too late. And at that point, you have no good options. And it seems like, again, declaring bankruptcy as fast as possible perhaps is the best one. One of the other things that I saw this morning, I don't know if this is confirmed, is that FTX has opened up some withdrawals specifically for entities based out of the Bahamas area, which in practice is a really sort of sleazy thing, I think, to do right now. I'm unclear kind of what the details are about that. Again, we're going to learn a lot more as we get into bankruptcy, kind of the bankruptcy proceedings as we did with these prior ones. But again, a lot of wrong stuff going on here. A lot of people hurting today. Zach, back to you.
Yeah, just a quick point before I toss this to Jen. The stuff that I saw, at least according to FTX, was that the Bahamas stuff was in accordance with local regulations. It's my understanding that withdrawals are being processed from FTX.US, at least intermittently as we speak. And yeah, there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on. But Jen, over to you.
Yeah, I want to talk about SBF statements, right? These statements have the statements have been released on Twitter. It started about a week ago with SBF saying everything is fine, your assets are fine. We open up Twitter today. We have SBF saying that he's piecing the details together. He's still in shock to see that this unraveled the way it did. But as we start to learn more about the poor business practices that led to what has happened this week, I don't think you can say you're in shock. And I've said this, with some of the other liquidations we've happened, some of the other companies that have filed for bankruptcy and issued similar statements. It's just so unfortunate that these CEOs, it's like they're saying sorry, but it's not really my fault because I didn't know, and not acknowledging the fact that we have a lot of facts now. We're starting to understand and see what was going on behind the scenes. And that's just not the case. You took a lot of risk that in the end, you and the companies that you led could not handle. And I would just love to see some of that acknowledgement, because there are a lot of people who are feeling the knock-on effects of this. Zach?
Yeah, so in the long term, I guess let's hope that this leads to a better market overall, right? An ecosystem that is predicated on fairness, transparency, and some of the promises of commerce free of intermediaries that often tends to lead to outcomes such as this. But in the short term, there's just a lot of pain, not even talking about sort of market movements right now with Bitcoin and other major assets falling pretty sharply. But we're talking about users whose funds are stuck for potentially a protracted period of time. We're talking about employees who were literally blindsided by this news shaking out over the last couple of days, employees of FTX who are now out on their own looking for what is going to be their next step, potentially also with significant savings attached to the platform. Now they enter the queue of creditors going forward. So I think in the long term, hopefully this is a positive thing for the industry and for the space. But in the short term, I think we have to be really empathetic to the users and employees of this platform who are really feeling a bit lost right now after a very rapid situation unfolded this week. So thinking of those folks who are directly affected, but again, hopefully this battle tests the crypto industry as a whole over the long run. Adam, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think there's one other element of this that's probably worth focusing on right now, which is that this story is probably not over. You know, this is FTX declaring bankruptcy along with many of its affiliated entities, but there are a lot of projects out there that really viewed FTX as the safest place to custody a lot of their funds. Those funds are now locked in a process that, if past examples, they filed in the U.S. at least, which is better than filing in Japan, which has a very, very drawn out process. But still, this is something that is likely to cause cascading insolvencies. This is something where we will very likely find counterparties who had lent money to one of these various entities and who now have a big giant hole in their balance sheets. And again, as we saw with kind of Celsius and some of the other earlier ones, this is a process that might take a couple of months for people basically to run out of room to run. And then finally have to acknowledge this. We've already started to see some players do this. BlockFi notably came out, and they're not insolvent, but they have, or at least they're not acknowledging insolvency, but they have frozen withdrawals. They have stopped operation in sort of the way that they were operating before. I expect that we will see more of that. It's a very dangerous time to be out there in the crypto space right now because we don't really understand the web of connections that ultimately will wind up unwinding as a result of all of this stuff that's going on. Zach?
Yeah, that's, something that, DeFi adherents are out there, sounding the alarm, right? This is a CeFi problem. This is not an on-chain problem. These are CeFi black boxes that ultimately obscure, obfuscate, and hide some of these risky business practices that they've undertaken, whether it's crypto lenders that we've seen falter in the past or Alameda in this instance, which seems to have led to the downfall of FTX, which was emerging as a highly trusted brand in the crypto space. And now we've seen it here on a Friday file for bankruptcy. Pretty crazy stuff. And I think the BlockFi news from last night, immediately halting operations, suggests that there may be a couple other notable CeFi players who face similar fates because they were tied up in FTX here in these last few months. Jen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just going to repeat kind of what I said yesterday, a public service announcement. If you have funds on a centralized exchange and are worried right now, get yourself a hardware wallet, hold your own coins, wait out the storm. If you are afraid, do that. It is not difficult to do, very easy to set up, and there's lots of information out there.
All right, we'll move on to our next story, but Jen, I just wanted to mention that unfortunately, in the current situation that we're in right now, that advice is actually that's exactly the action that will catalyze further failures faster. So in some ways it's good because it means that the pain will, again, be understood to be sooner. But again, it also just there's no right moves to make at this particular moment. The time to make those moves was a while ago.